I opened my book and began planning the next video. This video. I've been thinking about making a clock kind of from scratch for a while, but I thought I probably don't have enough time for this, so I quite literally wrote it down in the book. I don't think I want to make a clock. Yet, for some reason, I started designing the hands for it and how the general motion would work, how the driver gear will kind of keep everything in time and some basic maths. And then I went, F it, I'll make a clock. The way this clock will work isn't too complicated. See, the plan is that I'll keep the motor on the second hand. So I'll time it so that it completes one rotation per minute. And as long as this is kept in time, the rest of the clock will work perfectly fine as long as the gear ratios matched up. So the minutes hand, I'll ensure that it makes one rotation per hour. And same with the hours hand, I want it to complete one rotation every 12 hours. So if the seconds hand rotates one time per minute and the minutes hand rotates one times per hour, I want the seconds hands to rotate 60 times before the minute hand rotates once. So that's a 60:1 gear ratio. Now for the minutes to hours hand, it's the same principle. I want the minutes hand to rotate 12 times before the hours hand completes one rotation. So that's a 12:1 ratio. Now I had some restrictions here with the software I was using. I had to use gears that had more than 8 teeth and less than 60. So in theory, what I could have done is had an 8 teeth gear, which is my driver, hooked it up to a giant gear, which has 480 teeth, and that would have given me a 60:1 ratio. But I couldn't do that. Instead, I broke the gears up. I had an 8 to 40, 8 teeth to 40 teeth gear connection, which gave me a 40 to 8 gear ratio. On top of the 40 teeth gear, I put another 8 gear and connected that to a 48 teeth gear. That gave me a 48 to 8 gear ratio. You can see here the 5:1 and the 6:1 gear ratio on the screen. Then I added another 8 tooth gear on top of the 48 and connected that to a 16 tooth gear. That gave me a 16 to 8 or a 2:1 gear ratio. So here I've got 3 different gear ratios: 5:1, 6:1, and 2:1. But the way gears work is they multiply. So if I multiply the numbers together, I'll get a 60:1 gear ratio. So this plan should work. I then applied this to the 12:1 gear ratio that I needed to achieve. Since I used a 16 tooth gear previously, I connected that to a 48 tooth gear. That gave me a 3:1 ratio. Then I put an 8 tooth gear on top of the 48 and connected that to a 32 tooth gear, which gave me a 4:1 gear ratio. So 3 times 4 is 12, and therefore I was left with a 12:1 gear ratio. And so now that the planning was out of the way, I began designing this. So whilst planning this, I'd actually taken a short trip down to Sydney, which is really fun. I felt it was really cool. I got to work on my little project. Anyway, this here was the original plan that I'd had. Because of the fact that some gears were larger than others, I had to change the layout a bit, and I tried to do the maths to figure out if it still worked out properly. But I had a feeling that it didn't, because I substituted these 8 tooth gears between the different gears, and I felt that changed the ratio too much. So what I decided to do is I went back and changed the design a little bit. You see that here. So this looks slightly simpler because I stacked a lot of those little gears on top of the bigger ones, as discussed in the plan earlier. And this way I ensured all the ratios were transmitted across the mechanism accurately. And I had to use these little platforms that were kind of levitating above the gears to make this work. I was pretty proud of the way it looked really fancy and mechanical and whatnot. So I sent it over to the printer and began building the mechanism. Okay, before I get into it, can we just appreciate this, bro? It's safe to say I was pretty happy about the way this turned out. Seeing all the gears working together seamlessly, it was so smooth, and it was able to transmit the power across. Like, the stepper motor was able to move everything. It was just, I was so excited, bro. There were a couple things I had to adjust here and there, just kind of put a bit of pressure on the plastic to tilt some of the pegs so that the gears fit a little bit better, but other than that, nearly flawless. And then I decided to tear it apart to paint it. So I started taking out all the gears and all the pegs and everything, and I accidentally broke one of them, so I heated up a needle just over like a candle and then used that to melt the bits of plastic together. I would not recommend that. It's not safe, so don't do it at home. So once that was fixed, I took inspiration from the CAD design that I made and decided to paint the whole system kind of like pastel colors. You can see here it's kind of like a sea foamy green that I'm mixing. Then I slapped it with a coat of paint, different colors for different things, added the numbers dial as well, let it dry, and the clock was finally complete.